I lost a little bit in the beginning, and they just jacked up my limits. I had 70K live NBA spreads and 35K college live spreads and like 20K totals, and they were off market all the time. So, why focus on anything else when you're getting a 5% edge and getting, a couple million down a week?
Come on, let's go!
You think I'm going to come on here and put one of the Aussies in the elite tier?
I'd vote for Rob of 25,000. I wouldn't vote for you.
I can basically just cheat and get the same bets that they're getting. And
it's weird because you can also pay your bills at the same place where you bet.
This guy talks a lot of trash. He's talked a lot of trash about me, Rob, a lot of people in the community, but he's refusing to show his face.
Touting yourself as a pretty good NFL gambler, I thought you were an idiot.
Say testing, I'm a cuck. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Aussies, going head-to-head with the Aussies. That's what I drew for, and I said, get him, Kirk.
And they call me a mean-spirited name. I don't hang out with them.
The Toronto Maple Leafs at 14-1 are staring me dead in the face.
I'm already getting, a lot of early. This could be the best Circles Off episode that's ever been done.
Welcome to Circles Off, episode number 164, right here, part of the Hammer Betting Network, and presented by Pinnacle Sportsbook. I'm Rob Pizzola, joined today by Kirk Evans, playing a lot of golf recently.
I've been getting into it.
I was going through your Twitter feed to see like what shitstorm you've been causing recently, basically. And it's been surprisingly like pretty quiet on the Kirk Evans front. But you did have a post where you said that you ended up playing with practice balls when you went out to golf, and a lot of people were very unhappy.
Yeah, so I asked the guy, these bucket of balls, they're stamp practice. Are they practice balls? The guy tells me, no, they're good. I buy them. I think they're $350 a pop.
Ooh.
I think on hole 9 I realized I think I got bamboozled. I think overall I'm just a bit too trusting. Like, I go to bring my car into the shop. They tell me the circuit's broken. You need new oil, gas, blah, blah, blah. I just believe them. And I think I get bamboozled every time.
Were they Pro V1 practice balls?
No.
Do you remember the brand at all?
I think maybe like Callaway.
Callaway does have some upper tier level balls, but $350 a ball, like that's what you're paying for a good ball usually.
It was a bad luck.
See, like, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, you got to play with like a good ball. Like when you stink at golf, you don't need to play with a good ball. It's actually a complete waste of money. Like unless you have like a specific trajectory on your ball that you hit consistently, if you need a specific feel, if you want to spin the ball in a certain way, like if you're that good, then yeah, get whatever ball you need. But like the rest of the time, you really don't need that. However, if you're going to pay $350 a ball, you shouldn't pay $350.
I agree. Balls don't matter. Paying $350 for a ball that says practice on it, it's just bad luck overall. The Twitter comments, I agree. I got screwed.
Yeah, like sometimes I'll go to if I'm playing at like a really good course, their range balls will say practice on them, but they'll still be like a Pro V1 range ball, and they're better than.
You put a couple in your pocket?
I don't do that, but I've seen people do that. Like you'll find them on the course, right? Like you'll be like, well, how did this range ball get here? Like this is the 14th hole. It's nowhere near the range.
I think that's fair play.
Yeah, maybe.
Like maybe not 10, but like 3.
Yeah, I guess. I love Hitman's response to your tweet too. It's just you got fucked. That's
right.
It. That's it. Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? But yeah, I never like. There's so many people who are like, "Oh, you got to play with a good ball. You're not giving yourself a chance." It's like, dude, have you seen me swing? Like, I already have no chance. I don't need to pay $4 a ball. Like,
if the ball's rolling 20 yards, it doesn't matter if it's a Pro V or a practice.
Get that extra 1 yard into the water, when you duff it off the tee. Classic move. If you're looking for the Pro V1 of sportsbooks, you should check out Pinnacle Sportsbook. Available to bettors across Canada. Find out what pro bettors have known for the past 25 years. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. You got Olympics coming up. Highest limits on Olympics are at Pinnacle. I remember from the last Olympics last time out. If you want to bet football coming up this coming football season, you get some pretty good limits at Pinnacle. They're not going to limit you for betting the Olympics or betting preseason football or anything like that. So make sure you check them out. Use code HAMMER when signing up. It does help support us here on Circles Off. And before we get into our guest for today's episode, make sure you smash that like button down below. Make sure you're subbed here on Circles Off. Over 50% of you watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. Make sure you're subbed for a bunch of great future content. Our guest on Circles Off this week is a can of beans on Twitter. And as Kirk once famously said, there's nothing worse than getting roasted by a can of beans. He's also an experienced sharp sports bettor. You can follow him on Twitter at Frank Frijoles. Frank joins us today on Circles Off. Frank, how's it going?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. We like to start with the background story for each one of our guests. So if you could walk us through your early days of gambling and how you got involved in the betting space.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing I ever technically bet on was a March Madness pool at my mom's office when I was 5. Not exactly the sharpest thing as a 5-year-old putting in March Madness picks. But yeah, so when I turned 18, I grew up in Northern California, and there are some casinos there that you only have to be 18 to go to if they don't serve alcohol. Went there on my 18th birthday, played blackjack, lost $240. A lot of money for an 18-year-old at the time, maybe not so much these days, but yeah. So in the car back, I'm coming up with all kinds of harebrained strategies to win. Naturally, come up with martingale, Google it, and sure enough, doesn't work. So figured that out before I actually had to lose more money that way. But in the course of doing a little research on that, came across counting cards. So I learned to count cards, did a little bit of that at this Indian casino, Jackson Rancheria. And at the same time, it was right after Chris Moneymaker had won the World Series poker. So there's a big poker boom. All my friends were playing poker. Poker tables are right next to the blackjack tables. So I kind of transitioned into that. Bought some books by 2+2 Publishing. They have a big forum. Went to the forum. Didn't really post much in the poker section, but read some, played some poker, but then naturally got to college, gravitated towards sports betting. I played a lot of sports growing up, but I played rugby in high school, and that ended up being a really good transition because it's a small market, it's not efficient, especially almost 20 years ago. And I watched the games religiously. There's not a lot of data in rugby, especially at that time, but there still isn't a lot of publicly available data. The teams now do a lot of player tracking, have their own proprietary metrics, but publicly available, it's pretty sparse. So that was a good market to attack. Aren't a lot of games. There are a few leagues around the world, and especially back then, maybe the Greek would carry them and a couple others, but figured, hey, I want to do some more sports betting. So I tried college football. I actually ran kind of good, but I figured, hey, I'm not going to beat this with what I'm doing. So I got kind of lucky, kind of stumbled into arbitrage. And then I was reading the sports betting forum on 2+2 at the time, which was a lot of arbitrage talk and you guys call it top down now. So I kind of just transitioned into that because I said, hey, okay, I'm losing 3% on one side, winning 4% on the other. Why don't I just keep the 4% to myself? So yeah, started with top down, and their long teasers were pretty prevalent back then. You can still find some outs where teaser odds are good on NFL, but kind of transitioned from, okay, we'll just play off market numbers to, and at the time, off market numbers were like Sports Interaction back then. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that site.
Very familiar.
I don't think they offer. Yeah, because I don't think they do American customers anymore. But at the time they did, and they were just so square. Their number on an NFL Sunday night football game, where if you had a home underdog, they'd be 1.5 off and plus odds. That Patriots year where they crushed, they were like 3 points off market every time. It was crazy. So yeah, I bet with them and Bovada and a few others at the time, and then did some long teasers, and then kind of transitioned to some other approaches. So similar to long teasers, I had an edge on pleaser bets, and pleaser bets are kind of the opposite of a teaser. So instead of getting extra points, you give up points. And so naturally, you think about it, you want NFL teasers or just teasers in general, you want to find subsets that are more than the average. And so pleasers are the opposite. So think about it. It's like, okay, well, 6-point pleaser for football, you're gonna have to cross the 3 probably don't want to do that. But for basketball, it's great because you cross the zero and you're giving up 3 points instead of 4. So and you can look and say, hey, like there's plus 650, which I think is equivalent of plus 173 or so on the side on the individual legs. And, so it's like, okay, well, what's a money line for a 3.5 point underdog? And then you can look at other subsets, okay, 2.5, 1.5, et cetera. So, an NBA college basketball Saturday, you might have 20 games in that subset and just round robin everything. And so started transitioning and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I learned a bad lesson about networking at the time, which kind of hurt me. I shared that edge with, so I was on SBR forum at the time, shared that edge with a moderator who is widely known on Twitter, Elihu. And he said, yeah, I'll look into it. And then never sent anything back. A month later, the book had nerfed the odds to plus 600. A couple weeks after that, plus 550. 3 months later, they're out of business. And so I said, wow, I didn't get anything back from that. Networking, I should just keep edges to myself and just grind. And so I did for a while, and to my detriment, for sure, because I've started networking more lately, and it's been a really positive experience.
The way that you're talking about, you're coming up in sports betting, seems like a lot of it was rooted in math. I'm just curious, did you have some sort of schooling or background? Like, did you study statistics or anything like that? Anything that was transferable in terms of skills that would lead to being better at sports betting?
No, I took like a business stats class in college, right? And I was like, kind of bored with it. And it's like, oh wait, Poisson distribution, I might be able to use that in sports, or some other stuff like binomial stuff like that. But no, I don't have like a math degree or anything. I have a finance background.
Okay. And so throughout that journey, you kind of talked about being top down and then maybe some like math origination. How do you consider yourself as a bettor today?
Yeah. So, I would still consider like those flavor bets. I'd consider that top down because you're just using a market-based approach, right? You say, this is this is the nightly available number. We're going to use that as our source of truth. We think the distribution looks like this. I pretty much just used at the time, I just used Pinnacle drop downs. So whatever the price was on minus 1.5 or a 2.5 point underdog, I'd say that's, I know vig is the fair. And so I'd still consider that top down. As time has gone on, I've definitely transitioned to like maybe a top down plus approach and then more origination in the last couple of years. But there's more you can do with top down. Some people think top down just means stare at an odds screen all day. And others might say, well, there's more you can do with that approach. So it depends how you define it. But as time has gone on, I had to get more into origination just because, you either lose outs or things happen. Sometimes you can just focus on top down. I had an account with Play Up, who's now out of business, where I lost a little bit in the beginning and they just jacked up my limits. I had 70K live NBA spreads and 35K college live spreads and like 20K totals, and they were off market all the time. So, why focus on anything else when you're getting a 5% edge and getting, a couple million down a week? Like there's no reason to focus. So it depends on the timing. Yeah, if I have an account or a couple of accounts that are just a gold mine on something that's top down, then I'll focus on top down. If not, then I'll focus more on origination.
Those live NBA limits could explain why they're currently out of business.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and they would take, it was 70K on the spread, and then you could also hit 70K on each of the alt lines. So you'd end up, and a money line too. So you could end up with 280K in play.
And all it took was you to lose a little bit of money when you came in the door.
Exactly. So, but people ask, like non-sharp friends ask, oh, but should you just lose in the beginning? And I don't think so, because that happens, but that's more of a bonus to me when that happens. I don't think you have enough variance naturally that you don't necessarily want to just lose on things.
Yeah, I totally get it. You mentioned you've gotten into origination now. You talked off the top about how you were big on rugby in the early going. with the origination you're doing now, are you still involved in rugby? Is it other markets? What are you currently modeling yourself?
Yeah, so I still do rugby. It's not really a model. It's just like pretty much understanding the lineups and player values and stuff like that. Because there are a lot of lineup changes. Like an old edge, for example, in the Rugby World Cup, there's pretty big variation in levels of teams, and especially there's a big drop off towards the benches on the lower level teams. Like the U.S., for example, in 2011 might have had 5 or 7 guys playing professionally in Europe, and then and then everybody else is like a teacher or has a day job, and so there's pretty big drop off when they're not playing. And the Rugby World Cup back then, it's changed now, but they would have really short rest periods sometimes for teams. And so it's kind of like American football where you need a week to recover for your body. You would know that that the U.S. was going to rest their starters. It was very obvious. And so they would be a 48.5 point underdog to Australia and based on their starters. And so you take Australia minus 48.5 and the lineups would get announced and it would go to like 62. Which is a lot. It's, kind of roughly similar to football. You don't see a lot of 38 point spreads in football or 60.
Well, college football, you see a few here and there.
Yeah. Alabama versus Jacksonville State or something.
Yeah.
So it's about the same balance. So it's like minus 250 or minus 300 there, maybe more. Pretty big edges. Rugby World Cup figured out that wasn't very good for the product and also pretty unhealthy for because some teams would just try to like throw their players out and they just run out of games. So that edge has kind of gone away, but that was a big one. Rugby, I enjoy the sport. I watch it. I would say, you can get some down at PPHs and a little bit at some of these retail books, but you're not going to get the amount down that you can get on NBA or NFL or stuff like that.
How much competition is there in the rugby space?
Not much. I mean, you'll see it move, but you can usually still get a pretty good edge. There's not really anything like limits. They might change once, but they're pretty consistent. Everybody copies off of some European book, and then everybody posts it once. The limit is what the limit is for the most part.
And do you think you would still originate rugby? Like, is it more of like a passion project?
Yeah, it's more of a passion. Yeah, I would say like college basketball is probably 70% of my volume these days. And then, more NBA origination in the playoffs, and other points in the season where I think maybe something differs from what the base number should be.
So with rugby in particular, I mean, you mentioned you do a lot of college basketball. There's a lot of data sources for college basketball, like tons of metrics that you can use when projecting out, what your spread is going to be in the game and your total. What does the rugby data look like right now? Like, are there any elite data sources that you can use, or are you essentially just going to be in I don't want to say stuck in what you're doing now, but just like being able to roughly assess what a player is worth? How far does rugby come in terms of data?
Yeah, so you can use Opta, and there are a couple other ones, but I actually tend to focus more on like the even lower level stuff. So they're the top leagues in Europe, but then you'll have like the U.S. versus Canada or something like that, and there's not a lot of data on those players because they're in lower level leagues. There is a professional league in North America now, but there aren't a lot of stats kept on that. So yeah, it's purely just watching it and kind of understanding what the player's worth and finding big edges. But again, rugby is not a big part of my volume these days. I enjoy it, but it's less than 1%.
Got it. In terms of the market itself, we've chatted via DMs leading up to this interview as I was trying to book you to come on as a guest. And I know that you very likely started betting in the PPH/offshore space. You even mentioned it with Bovada, Sports Interaction, having some PPHs. How has regulated betting changed your life, if at all? Has it had a large impact on what you do, or are you still very much focused on PPH and offshore?
Yeah, so it's had a really good impact. Especially initially. I live in Colorado, and we had the books come in 2020. Unfortunately, they launched like in the middle of COVID shutdowns, but yeah, I mean, they're offering great bonuses, lots more outs. I mean, we had over 21 books at one point that were here. You know, there's been some consolidation, unfortunately, but yeah, no, it's been a huge boost for me. And even then, still, I have Circa here, I have FanDuel, and a few other accounts, and then also counters and kiosks up in Blackhawk. So that's been really a positive for me. But I still bet offshore. I still bet with PPHs. I mean, it's just about getting it down as much as you can, right?
Yeah, sounds like a pretty similar market to Ontario. I think we have probably double the amount of sports books that you have in Colorado, but at some point or another, it'll dwindle down, as is happening already. We have some kiosks here now as well, as Kirk can attest to. I've seen him jamming some kiosks at Woodbine before. What about it in Colorado? Do you have any experience with kiosking or anything like that?
Yeah. So just randomly, I hadn't really considered kiosks or placing bets at the counter previously, and I did a payout one time from a book. They can mail you a check, or you can pick a kiosk up in Blackhawk, and I'd been up there since college, I guess, to playing a poker tournament. And yeah, so I drove up, picked up some cash, and then just decided to check out the rest of the town. And yeah, so I started jamming some kiosks at DraftKings, thinking, I'm being really sly, right? Just jamming this kiosk, nobody's noticing. The guy comes up behind me, he's like, "Oh, we'd like to make you VIP," and I've been limited on DraftKings app at this point already. I'm like, "I'm good." Like pros, right? He's like, "Well, can we at least get your name?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Frank." Like, well, we're gonna need your last name and fill out a W-9 and all that stuff. And so it ended up after a little bit, they didn't like some of the stuff I was doing at the kiosk. So they said, well, you can have $500 limits at the counter, or you can have $5,000 limits on anything other than NFL props at the counter, which is amazing. But, I can bet $5,000 on a rugby first half team total. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like that actually shouldn't happen. But yeah, so that was really good. And then eventually they dropped that down to 2K and to 200 this year. And so yeah, I don't spend as much time up there anymore. The number of places with kiosks has dwindled as well. Superbook had a kiosk and a counter. They closed, and a few others did as well.
But you're still allowed on the premises, so not so bad.
At DraftKings, yes.
Got it.
Not at Monarch trespassed me.
And when you were jamming that kiosk, were you like same bet over and over when that guy came and tapped you on the shoulder?
Yeah, or same series of bets.
Got it.
Yeah, so like a John Morant all over 4.5 or over 3.5 threes in playoff game or something that had to won. And it happened to hit too, so they weren't very happy about it. But yeah, no, it's interesting with kiosks. Like every kiosk has its own intricacies. So I think you just have to play around with it a little bit and figure out what it is. They all have some type of deposit limit. They may have an internal limit of the most you can to win amount or to risk amount. Some of them you can like at DraftKings, at least in the past, you could just load up. It used to be a $3,000 limit at the kiosk, and it may differ via location. It's also what I learned is the host casino, it's not affiliated with the book, also has some input because I guess they're at risk as well, rather than just renting the space. But yeah, so at the time it was like $29.99 limit. So what I do is I just put in $2,900, get a voucher back, and then have like 8 of them to scan back in. That way you can just rapid fire. Other places may not have that capability, and other places may have you hit a internal limit and then they stake factor everything down to 10% or whatever. So yeah, you just need to kind of play around with it till you figure out what the best practice is.
Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast right now, that nugget of getting the voucher to scan, if that's something you might be interested, might be a very good thing to take that advice. But I want to ask about how you feel as a whole. We talked some about consolidation of books. Let's say in 2020, when we got regulated, did you feel like by 2024 there would be more consolidation, less consolidation? How do you feel like outs are in general in 2024 for you and more generally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a positive trend. I mean, it's going to keep consolidating. Yeah, in 2020, I wasn't really thinking about it that much. I knew there would probably be some consolidation, but you're kind of in the golden age, but you don't realize it. They're offering crazy bonuses on the apps, and you just kind of take it for granted. And yeah, I mean, if I had to change something, I would just. I mean, I went pretty hard, but you can always go a little harder. So
Yeah, totally.
it's the same thing with like poker back in 2005. Like 5 years later, I was like, man, I wish I had just like played poker nonstop. It was a gold mine back then.
Yeah, I was going to draw that comparison too. And when you were playing in the heyday of poker, you thought that this was going to be like the biggest thing forever. No one had like any idea that it was just, okay, slowly the best players are going to start beating the worst. And, eventually even a sharp poker bettor just is not up to the standard of those above them. And that tailed off pretty quickly. In terms of Blackhawk, just out of curiosity, I've never been myself. Everyone that I know that's Colorado-based, or even who has been to Blackhawk before, they're always like, you got to go there. Like, it's such an amazing spot for bettors. Do you share that sentiment? And, like, what is it specifically that would make this, like, a must-see spot for another sports bettor?
Well, it's a very beautiful drive up there. There are two different ways you can go, and it's very pretty. It's up in the mountains. It's actually kind of a pain in the ass in the winter because sometimes it'll just be 3 feet of snow. They got 5 feet of snow one time this year. And so sometimes you'd go. So when I had the big limits at the counter at DraftKings, there'd be days in the winter where nobody showed up to the counter because they couldn't get there or called in sick or whatever. So, but it's a really beautiful place. I don't think it's the best place ever. It's not Vegas. Like the food isn't great. There are a couple casinos that are nice. Monarch's a nice casino. Maristar's okay. Everything else is pretty rinky-dink. But I don't know. It's okay. But it's a really pretty drive. You can go do hiking and stuff around there. I drove up there a couple days ago, and I was passing some people doing whitewater river rafting on the river, or on the creek, rather. So yeah, it's worth checking out if you're in Colorado.
This might be a controversial take, but I actually hate being in a casino. As a sports bettor, like
that's not at all.
I can conceptualize that like people need to lose for me to be able to win, but the feeling of me walking through Woodbine on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. and the parking lot's full and there are thousands of slot machines taken just depresses me a little bit.
Oh, it's depressing. You got like some really awful people. Like playing poker, live poker. People are angry because they're losing. And they're already kind of the dregs of society. So, I'm not a fan of casinos. I'd rather spend as little time as possible in them, but necessary evil, I guess.
Agreed.
Before we go deeper, I just want to make sure that I get this in so that people know. But the Frank Frijoles alias and the can of beans avatar, where did that start? Like what? Obviously, that's not your real name. I'm not going to share your real name or anything like that. But where did all of that start? How did you come up with that?
I just thought I'd have a stupid Twitter burner handle and alliterative, and Frank Frijoles, Frank and Beans. So pretty mature. And that's a lot of thought went into it.
All right. Yeah, just I was always curious. Sometimes I wonder how people. There's so many like good aliases out there. I'm not clever enough to come up with some of these really good ones, but there's some that you could clearly tell put a lot of effort into coming up with theirs.
For sure. And I think no one thinks about like, obviously it's not actually impactful, but I'm sure when you were making a Twitter account, you wouldn't have thought that like now everyone in the gambling community, when they think of you, thinks of a can of beans. Like NFL pin beater. I think he is Bill Belichick. Like when I picture him in my imagination, I imagine him as Bill Belichick. And if I ever see him in person, it's going to be very strange that he's not Bill Belichick.
For sure, 100%. Also, like some partners that I've met more recently, they just refuse to call me by my real name. They just want to call me Frank, and that's fine.
Absolutely. I have the same experience as well.
Hey Circles Off fans, if you enjoy the content we put out here on this channel, you're going to want to see us live in person this year at Bet Bash, hosted at Circus Sports in Las Vegas, Nevada. August 7th at 5 p.m., Rob, Johnny, and myself will be doing our first ever in-person Circles Off episode. If you want to find out more information about where it's going to be, how it's going to be hosted, and how you can get involved, make sure to subscribe here to the channel. Follow us on all podcasting platforms and follow us on our social media channels so that you can stay up to date with the latest news, information, and updates. Enjoy the rest of the episode. We hope to see you there.
Yes. All right. You mentioned earlier off the top some old edges that you've had in betting. And it's very hard to do this podcast because there's a subsection of the viewership or listenership that's always like, oh, can you share some like real-time edges? And we try to point people in the right direction. I think a really good learning experience for people sometimes is when others can share old edges that they had and how they came up with them, because it kind of gives the mindset of like what someone might be looking for to find an edge in sports betting. So what are some of the biggest edges that you've had over the course of your sports betting career that maybe no longer exist, and how did you stumble upon them?
So the pleaser bets were a good example, but yeah, obviously there are many. Let's see. So there was a point where a major sports book was consistently mispricing first half team totals on almost every basketball league in the world. And I mean, it would be like a first half total would be 80 and the spread, let's just say it was a pick, and one team would be 40 and a half and the other team would be 38 and a half plus 100 on the over. And it's like, wow, that's obviously mispriced. So, I mean, that was one example. Sometimes you'll find something systematic like that and you don't expect it to last so long. But when you find it, yeah, I happened to find it like a week before my wedding. So I was like on my honeymoon, like putting in all the, I was like, hey, I just need a couple hours to pick every basketball league in the world.
How did your new wife feel about that?
Well, yeah, she's okay. She knows what
pay for the honeymoon.
Exactly. Let's see. Cricket. I had a cricket edge where I figured out that half an hour before the match, there's a coin toss. And the coin toss, whoever wins the coin toss gets to choose whether they bat first or second. Also, right around that time is when the team lineups are announced. So, I mean, you could just go look at Betfair and watch. I mean, you could also like Twitter search toss and you get some interesting results until you got what you wanted. But yeah, the line would move like 20, 30 cents depending on there are different types of cricket where it matters more and some pitches where it matters more or less. But again, that's just a top-down approach where you knew that the line was going to move based on something, on some news, and get ahead of it. Especially at slow moving, American-facing books, especially back then, don't tend to be up on something like that. Whereas a book in Australia or England is probably going to be familiar.
Yeah, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in cricket, I used to watch some IPL. I want to say maybe like 8 to 10 years ago, and one entire team bats first, correct, and then the other team bats second. So, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you know that the better team is batting first, you're more likely to see more runs, I would say, because they go through their entirety of their lineup rather than just, when they win, the game ends.
Correct. Although you don't, at least on U.S. facing books, you don't tend to see as many over-unders on cricket.
Got it.
But there is an advantage to going first or second, and it depends on a variety of factors. And forgive me at this point because I don't bet cricket anymore. But yeah, like it depending on the pitch, there's an advantage because the ball will bounce differently as it goes on because they don't like sit. So it's a moving target basically, and also based on I think the light from the sun, time of day, type of thing. So it's dependent on where in the world because different countries have different kind of firmness to their grounds and different types of bars have different specialties in different parts of the world. But yeah, it's really an advantage to win a toss because you get to choose whether you go first or second.
I absolutely love the nuances of betting on sports. Like depending on whether you're going first or second, the ball bounces differently. The time of day could be different. Maybe the sun plays a bigger factor. Like that kind of stuff is what makes, in my opinion, and maybe for some people, it actually makes sports betting like cumbersome and they don't want to deal with that. But that to me is like a problem that I love to solve.
For sure. And I will say, like, I'm not going to say exactly what the edge is, but there's a similar edge in another sport in terms of like pregame decision making that moves a particular line a lot.
Well, even like the Euros and Copa America just finished, and if you were betting going into penalties, if you watch the markets react to the team after the coin toss, the team that shoots first would just get steamed like heavily right away. So there's obviously a big advantage. I've never done the math on it, but there's obviously a big advantage in shooting first in those types of situations.
Maybe it's psychological.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The pressure of you need to score, I guess.
What's XG for a penalty kick in soccer? I think it's like 0.78, something like that. So it's almost 4 out of 5 you're going to score. So if you go first and you score, there's just like an added element of pressure for every subsequent shot. It's like that team's up against it. So, but yeah, stuff like that, I guess, is just like a small little thing. Coin toss. We're taking the ball first, and you get steamed out to like 60% favorite based off of that.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
And how do you deal? I know for myself, for example, like I can think back to specific edges and like it gives me a pit in my stomach, even thinking about like how I didn't jam it harder. How do you deal with, past edges? Do you think about them? Does it get to you emotionally at all?
Get to me emotionally. I almost look back like wistfully, like, oh, that was, I missed that edge, but it's going to evaporate at some point, and you got to find the next thing, whether that's some top-down type thing or originating or whatever. You got to keep evolving in space because you don't know what's coming.
Yep,
absolutely.
Totally. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about networking because I'm a big proponent of networking. Me and Johnny have talked about it several times before. We have Bet Bash coming up in a couple of weeks, which to me is a great networking event. You've had some mixed experiences, which you mentioned off the top. Some bad experiences, some good. I'm curious about the bad side of networking and where it potentially caught you in the past.
Yeah, so it was just like I explained on this. Laser bets, gave away my edge, got nothing back. It went away faster than it otherwise would have. There's no proof that it actually happened, but I'm sure that's what happened. I didn't. Nobody stole any money, nothing like that. So it wasn't that bad, but I just kind of took a step back from that for a little bit.
How do you balance that though? Because like a lot of us want to talk sports with one another and share ideas with one another. I mean, there could potentially be good things that come from sharing that type of edge, right? Potentially someone finds it and says like, listen, I can really help you get down on this. So like, I mean, how do you balance that?
Right. And that was my intent when I shared it. Hopefully I'd get something back, and it didn't happen, but and more recent. So it was to my detriment that I didn't network for a while after that. But more recently I have been networking a bit more, but started with a friend who's a poker player. He had a PPH account. I hadn't actually done a lot of PPH until about 5 years ago. And so I kind of taught him during the pandemic. I taught him top down. He had nothing to do. His job was pretty slow with shutdowns. There wasn't much sports going on. We were, steam chasing Nicaraguan soccer. Shout out to Real Madrid's. Not Real Madrid. So from there, he was able to get some more accounts, and then he got his brother involved. I think Trench might have called them the Bar Mitzvah brothers.
Yes, he did. He did. Which
they're not the real. Yeah, they're not the real Bar Mitzvah brothers, but that's what I call them.
Oh man, there's been a lot of debates and discussion on Twitter recently about hedging bets with potentially other bets that are zero expected value or even negative expected value. Based off some of your replies you've made to those tweets, you might have a strong opinion on what you think is right or wrong in these types of situations. So hedging bets, one of the most controversial topics in betting Twitter. I'll give you the floor to talk us through that and what you think about hedging with other negative expected value bets.
Yeah, so I mean, based on my experience, the way I came up is I ground up my own bankroll. I didn't have many partnerships, and so I just used Kelly or a factor of Kelly, especially early on with top down type stuff. And so to me, I use that as my kind of framework and my mindset. Maybe other people have different goals. I think Trench mentioned, over betting, because you either have to get to a certain level or not. But I think it depends on your goals. Like if you have some amazing job and or like a job offer and you're deciding, well, I either want to do that or I need to make X from sports betting, then maybe that makes sense. But to me, I'd rather, especially with like marginal utility concerns with money, like, going from 0 to $1 million is not the same as going from 1 to 2 million. It's just not, in terms of quality of life. So I think for me, I kind of lean towards Kelly usually, and Kelly falls for minus EV hedges and at points, always 0 EV hedges. Because if you're getting your expected value, that's like the best thing ever, because your expected growth is always less than your expected value if there's money at risk.
This was the specific discussion that you taught me in a little bit rough fashion, but I appreciate it for sure. How often would you say you're hedging your bets?
That's not, honestly. First off, it does feel terrible.
Absolutely.
To make a minus EV bet, right? There's like something physically painful about it. But at the same time, there's also, if I notice something that's a good, like 0 EV hedge or even slightly minus EV hedge, I'll do it. But you have time considerations too, right? There's an opportunity cost to going and looking for all these hedges as opposed to just finding other bets or working on your models or whatever else.
Yeah, I actually love that you brought that up, because I think there's a lot of people who think that you can solve a lot of these with math. And generally I would agree. But there's stuff exactly like you mentioned. Like there's an opportunity cost associated with that. If it's going to take me an hour or two to figure out what this hedge needs to be, like exactly, and that's a drastic example, probably wouldn't take that long. But like, could that time be better spent elsewhere? And what's going to be my EV on that? Like it's actually a way more complex problem. And I think a lot of people just overly simplify it into like, it has to be this or it has to be that. And I actually think that's just like gambling Twitter as a whole, honestly. Like we see the arguments every single week and people pick up on like these little things. And I just think there's so many situations in gambling or sports betting where it's just dependent on the bettor. Like what I'm going to do is going to be different from what Kirk does, what Zach does, what Frank does. And I think a lot of that just gets lost in conversation when people are trying to figure it out specifically through math, solving it with math.
For sure.
Yeah.
And like expected utility, that's not something you can really calculate. I mean, maybe somebody wants to spend all that time to figure out their own utility curve, but like, come on, there's better stuff you can be doing.
Yes. Same thing happened with the Trench episode that you mentioned. So episode 161 of Circles Off, we'll link it in the description below, but got a lot of good feedback on it. But there's a lot of people talking about Trench's comments about overbetting, which was, some of the advice that he would give. And it was like real back and forth of like, this is stupid advice, this is great advice. And my whole thing was like, it's probably good advice for some people and probably bad advice for some people as well. Like it's just his opinion on what you should do, but like let's not take it as like this is 100% every single bettor needs to do this.
Absolutely. And I think also you have a consideration. So like if you're talking about overbetting and needing to get to a certain level, if you're new to the market, let's say you think you're a great math modeler, great, but there's still stuff about the market you may not understand until you're actually in it. You need to know when limits go up. You need to know what does market resistance look like? How should you react to that? And that's stuff you only get through experience in the market. And so I think taking a little time to build up a bankroll is okay while you figure that stuff out before you start wanting to slam, NFL spreads at post.
Yeah, totally agree. We like to wrap up with some personal reflections all the time. This one's a little bit unique. I need to know what your I know you listen to Circles Off pretty regularly because we've chatted about some episodes before via DMs. I need to know what your exact reaction was when Kirk stated that there's nothing worse than getting roasted by a can of beans. Like, did you laugh at that? Was it? I'm just very curious about what your reaction was in real time.
Yeah. So one of my partners, who I didn't get a chance to mention yet, but I'll talk about them in a minute. But he, in our group chat, he said, "Hey, you got to listen to the 36 or whatever. It's what the latest Circles Off." So when I was at a family gathering, went off into a room and listened to it and started dying. So it was hilarious. And then I showed it to my wife, and she thought it was the funniest thing ever too. So yeah. very, very positive. It's actually what got me to come on the show today.
There you go, Kirk.
Look at
there
me.
you go. Positive value. Plus EV, Kirk Evans over here. You mentioned you wanted to mention your partner. So you're working with a group of people or just one single partner?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I have the two partners I mentioned before who have been a really positive experience. They're great at getting accounts, and they do top down on their own. Then I feed them some stuff too. And so it's been a really beneficial thing with them. They're also good friends. But more recently, about a year ago, a friend of mine who's a poker guy, he's probably the only poker guy I would ever trust with any money since they're always broke. But
it's a cycle. It's a cycle for the poker guys, right? Broke, they make it back, and then they're broke again. It's vicious.
Yeah, he never seems to be broke, so he's good. But
that's a good sign.
He would, it's a good sign for sure. He's a good guy. But he was modeling some League of Legends stuff, and we're talking about that a little bit, and some other approaches in some other sports. And he knew that I had some Rugby World Cup group bets I wanted to get down, and he had some friends that were going to help me get down. So he introduced me to them, and they all helped me get down. Ran really hot, hit like a bunch of 20 to 1s and stuff like that were maybe like plus 600 bears. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, these are great accounts getters. And it turns out they're actually like legit on their own too. Like they're just crushing NBA player props and some WNBA and NBA stuff. And again, they're all into League of Legends betting. They crush that. So it's been really, really beneficial. And so yeah, I'm all very positive on that.
The way you worded that, they're all into the League of Legends betting. I take it you're not into esports, or are you on board with that as well?
I mean, I help them fill, but yeah, I mean, I try to watch it. I would like to learn more, but there's also a time issue, and it's also often at like 2 a.m. So that's harder when I'm old with a baby.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to ask you your age. I'm not going to ask you your age, but I think we're roughly, just based off of your story, in the same age range. And I grew up on video games, and I played a ton of video games when I was young, like always into it. Yet I still find like esports, it's just I can't get there. I don't know what it is about it. There's just something where it's so challenging for me to get over the hump. I don't know. I can't put my finger on what it is because I love video games.
I think I've never played League of Legends, and maybe I should if I wanted to get more into it. But yeah, I mean, supposedly the tactics and the strategy are really interesting, but I'm not there yet. But happy to fill anything. It doesn't matter if it's esports or rugby or cornhole. If somebody had an edge on cornhole, that's fine. Like, money's money.
Yeah. So going back to this partnership, would you say it's like each guy kind of on their own doing whatever, originating top down, and then helping each other fill? Or do you guys actually hop on to each other's kind of origination and give tips and pointers there?
So in places where we overlap, we definitely like work together. And that's been really beneficial, like attacking NBA and NHL playoffs this year. We did a lot of stuff together, and yeah, it ended up being kind of like a loosely formed syndicate. Like somebody fills, they take half, and then offer the rest to everybody else. And yeah, it's been really good for my own stuff too.
It's good. You guys pay each other in rookie cards with this syndicate every now and then? That's a different type of syndicate, I guess.
I guess so, yes.
Yeah. All right. Doesn't have to be related to sports betting. Can be if you want to. Totally up to you. Floor is yours. But one thing that you think is plus EV in life, and one thing that you think is minus EV in life.
All right, plus EV. We're getting old, Rob. So you got to start thinking about the longevity stuff. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot more about that lately. There's some books out there about improving your health span. But one of those pieces is strength training. And I hadn't done a lot of strength training until a couple of years ago, and I started this thing called Starting Strength. And it's a great place for anybody that's a beginner or novice in strength training, because it's very regimented. 3 days a week, you do almost the same lifts every day. There's a little bit of variation, and you just add a little bit of it each time. And it's not going to get you to be like a competitive power lifter, but it's going to get you 90% of the way there. And so it's a really good program. They even have some gyms around. I joined their local gym for a little bit, and all the coaches there were former strength and conditioning coaches at the college level. Really, really good. And then I built a gym in my garage, so I didn't need it anymore. But it was really helpful. So you can look it up online. It's free. It's just pretty basic. Really beneficial.
Starting strength. You can use promo code Frijoles as well if you want to.
Promo code Frijoles, yeah.
If you want to get started on that. It's funny that you mentioned that. This is really sad, but I will share it anyways, regardless. Last week, the CTO of BetStamp, Julian Packer, got married. And I got pretty wasted at the wedding, and I was dancing like the whole night. And I woke up the next morning, and I couldn't move. So like I could use some starting strength because I literally like can barely move after a night of dancing nowadays. I went to physio and she's like, "What the hell happened to you?" Like I'm like, believe me, one night of dancing was it. Zach, you got a plus EV?
No, not this week.
I put him on the spot.
Yeah, I know.
He was just like, he's trying to find the buttons to talk. Anything from you, Kirk?
Yeah, this one I've actually had in the chamber for a while, but it's perfect that Frank is here for this. Posting either controversial or things you think might be dumb on Twitter. Obviously pretty niche. You need to maybe have a few followers for it. But if you have a controversial opinion that you're thinking 50-50, this is like way off, but 50-50, I'm onto something. If you post it on Twitter, people like Frank will come in and tell you you're an idiot if you're being an idiot. And that's very true. There are a lot of really smart people on gambling Twitter. You kind of have to get used to getting roasted on Twitter. I think that's something everyone has to, take a couple lumps. Some people don't take too well to that. But if you post it and it's a fine post and people agree, maybe you'll get a couple likes. No one will really comment. If it's really dumb, smart people will let you know, and then you can kind of form some opinions off that. Like, even last year, I posted some NBA polls of who I think who do you think is better? And look, it wasn't going to really form my opinion, but I got some really good, interesting comments, and I learned about it. So I think you can kind of take getting dunked and make it a plus EV.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I know of someone who used to, on the 2+2 forums, intentionally say something wrong to provoke, really smart people to, they want to satisfy their ego, and they start giving away little edges because he said something intentionally wrong that was kind of trolling. So that's definitely an angle. So yours is the nicer way to do it. This is the more nefarious.
Yes, exactly. Like, people who are smart really hate seeing something that's posted that's dumb. They will comment.
Yeah.
And then you can learn.
You don't know ball.
Exactly.
You don't know ball. I'm gonna keep piggybacking on the advice that Hagrin gave, which was let's keep the plus EV segment as like actual stuff that has positive expected value, not just opinions. Recently, I've put a Lazy Susan in my fridge, which sometimes I was just getting really annoyed by like reaching into the back of the fridge and knocking stuff over. By putting a lazy...
How much stuff do you have in your fridge?
Don't get me started. This is a discussion with the wife that needs to happen. But as a workaround, you got like a lot of condiments or something like that don't fit on the shelf. They're in a spot in the fridge. Just put them on a Lazy Susan instead, because you can just rotate that. Easy to grab stuff. Honestly, same amount of space, but just way better utility. So it's a little small thing, but it's caused less, pain. Let's say when I open the fridge.
So you're just like reaching in the fridge, milk was spilling all over the place.
It's not that milk was, but sometimes you got to move stuff out of the way to reach something else. And I find that to be, even though it's a little thing, I find that to be a nuisance. So instead of having to move stuff out of the way, you now just spin the tray around and you get the stuff that's at the back.
Perfect.
It really worked
Doesn't the Lazy Susan take up like a ton of space in there?
It does not.
I wasn't going to say it, but that's what I was thinking as well.
No, because that space would still be taken up.
But like a Lazy Susan's pretty big.
Yeah, it's a large circular, but that space, I mean, you're not losing any space. You're losing like maybe a couple inches
but
in
also,
height.
You can't really
Can we get a
put stuff
picture
in
of your fridge in the links?
Yeah, that's a good, because also can't you not put anything in the middle, because then you're having the same problem if you're reaching around if it's in the middle of the Lazy Susan?
You don't have to give it the reach around. No, it's very... Listen, you know what? We will post it to the Circles Off Twitter account. at Circles Off HQ. Make sure you're followed. You're following on there, and we will get that posted. Maybe I'm not describing it well enough, but it's honestly a big space saver and much easier to access things at the back of your fridge.
I'm very excited to see the picture.
I'm sure people really are right now. Minus EV, Frank.
Ooh, all right. You're at a bar. It's like, well, I don't stay out this late anymore. Well, last Friday I went to the Billy Joel concert in Denver. We were out kind of late, which is it's rough with a kid. But having that drink at the end of the night, it doesn't do you any good. You don't feel any better. You just feel worse in the morning. It's hard to say no to at the time because you're having a good time. But that last drink, like you have a drink and then leave, like, what are you doing? You just pass out when you get home and feel 10% worse in the morning.
Oh, I mean, I feel you, man. Like, even truer words have never been spoken. That resonates. It hits home with me so hard. Cannot help myself with that last drink. That does nothing for you because you're going to bed anyways. Like,
you're going home. You're leaving the bar.
Yeah.
I will say I'm really bad at following my own advice.
Yeah, we all are.
It's hard to say no to a drink.
You have to plant it in the back of your head beforehand, or else you're done.
That's a good negative EV. I totally agree. Mine, a bit of like a double negative, positive EV, negative EV, but like not doing things because they're lame. Like, there's a lot of things in life I do that, like, people think are, like, nerdy and weird. Like, I've been grinding Minecraft for the past 2 weeks. Have gone dunked on by all my friends. But whatever. I like it. It's fun. So do what you like. Who cares if it's, like, nerdy and lame?
All right. It's funny hearing that from you because I think if Johnny were in this chair, the take would be a complete 180. Be like the exact opposite of this.
I've seen Johnny dunk.
You're not learning any skills from playing Minecraft. It's a waste of time. Don't do that.
It's the perfect mindless game where, like, it's 12 midnight. You've got a summer league under. There's nothing worse than sweating a summer league under. Grind some Minecraft. An hour goes by. It hits or it doesn't. Yeah.
Frank, was there like a game that you like? I used to grind Roller Coaster Tycoon pretty hard, like extremely hard. I don't even want to tell you how many hours I wasted on that game in my youth. Was there something in specific that you did?
Mine's pretty lame. Probably just FIFA.
Yeah. All right. FIFA. Guinness world record holder in FIFA right here, by the way.
For what?
Largest margin of victory against an AI opponent.
It still holds?
No, I got beat by like a Bulgarian teenager a couple weeks after I set the record. Yeah. But I do have a certificate. 289 to nothing.
That's pretty good.
It was a good run.
What was the game like?
It's the max, so 40-minute halves, which is the max you can put on the game at the easiest difficulty level. I played as Juventus against Cork City. This would have been in the mid-2010s, and the reason I picked Juventus is because they had the best midfield. They had Arturo Vidal and Claudio Marchisio, and these were guys that the big thing in this, like when you're doing like a speed run like that, is how quickly you can dispossess the other team off of the kick, because you're scoring, they get possession, so you need like good tackling midfielders, and those guys that can get the ball quickly, score. That. Speaking of wasted time, don't get like the practice runs for that. Don't even get me started.
Practice runs.
Oh, the practice.
It was already an 80-minute game.
Yeah, and
how many times did you do it?
Well, I did it on work time. I was working at the score.
Got it.
And
it was a work project.
I was the FIFA champ at the office, and the social media guy at the score saw this thing come across, like this guy set this record, and he brought me the video, and he's like, "You think you could do this?" I watched this guy play. I'm like, I will shatter this. And we did, and it became a big, like, popular thing for 3 or 4 weeks. And me and this Bulgarian guy kept going back and forth. So I set it at 289 originally. The best I ever did was 310, and then he did 317, and I
just couldn't get that.
I never got there in a practice run. My wife, I don't know if I was married yet at the time, but she was just like, we got to stop doing this. Like, this can't happen anymore. I'm like, okay,
that's fair.
Big time minus EV move in life, by the way, right there. Big time minus EV. Frank, we'll end on this. If you could go back 5 years and talk to a previous version of yourself, what advice would you give to your former self?
Grind as hard as you can, hit those edges while they exist. And back then, bonuses were were big, I would have probably grinded a little hard on bonuses. But yeah, I mean, no regrets really. And you got to balance life too. So
Totally agree.
For sure.
His fake name is Frank Frijoles. You can follow him on Twitter at that. We'll post his Twitter down in the description below. You might get dunked on a few times, as Kirk knows, but it's all in good fun. You could check out Starting Strength or whatever. That's what it was, right? Starting Strength?
Yep.
Promo code Frijoles. That doesn't exist, but it's there as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you do subscribe here on Circles Off. We've got a ton more content coming up leading up to football season. Make sure you check out Pinnacle Sportsbook as well. If you liked the episode, smash that like button. Thank you very much, Frank, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode. Peace out.